going on? Chuck here, and this morning I'm taking the day off from guitar playing to kind of let things rest and recover. It's good to do sometimes, I think, but I still feel like thinking about guitar. So I wanted to tell a story today about what I learned about guitar playing from having an exploded appendix. Because I did learn something that I think is important. So before I tell you, we have one listener today. Oh, there he is. He can't stay awake though. He's very sleepy. That's Chappie. I don't know where my girl is. She's around here somewhere. So I think it was a few years ago. I remember I was talking to my mom on the phone one day, and by the time I got off the phone, I was laying on the floor because my stomach hurt so bad. Now, I didn't really put things together. The next day, I ended up having a full day of teaching. And, I had to lay down in the middle of my day and kind of rest because my stomach hurt so bad. It was funny. I had one family that quit taking with me because they were upset with my makeup policy. And that was the last day I ever taught them, and I taught them with an exploded appendix. I didn't know, they didn't know, and I guess they'll never know. So there's my girl. So I just kind of think that's funny. Anyway, the next day I ended up getting checked out. They eventually sent me to the ER, and they just said I had an exploded appendix, and apparently it was really nasty. They were surprised I was walking around and things like that. But when that happens to you, you can get real confused. If you have sepsis like I did, I remember when they told me I had an exploded appendix, I just thought that's not possible. And I had no reason to think that. I was just confused. So in case you don't know this, because I didn't know, these days they don't do immediate surgery on you anymore when your appendix ruptures. What they do is they check you into the hospital and they pump you full of antibiotics, like multiple bags per day, until you get over it. So I was in the hospital for, I think, 6 days, and just felt like I was going to die, honestly. It was real bad. But eventually got better. Eventually they released me once I was over the hump. I got sent home still with more, oral antibiotics that I was supposed to take. And so it took me a while to recover, but I eventually did. And one of the things, being in the hospital for all that time, and I think all the antibiotics and just not moving very much, I lost a lot of weight, and it just zapped all the strength from my body, right? I got really thin. I felt like I lost all my muscle tissue, or most of it anyway. So even after I was home, I was still recovering for a while. And it was probably 2.5 weeks, something like that, before I could get back to the guitar. So when I finally felt up to it, I thought, okay, I'm going to go and try and play the guitar. And, I knew that it would probably feel real difficult, but I was ready to start working my way back. So, of course, I was out of shape. Of course, things were difficult. It wasn't like I couldn't feel anything, but, I wasn't really surprised at most things. But there's one thing that really did surprise me that I didn't see coming. And at this point, I'd been playing fingerstyle guitar for about 10 years, something like that, 9 or 10 years. So a lot of practice time, a lot of development. And there was something that I didn't realize I had developed that's super important. And that is the control of your tip joints on your plucking hand. Okay. What I found was when I would go to pluck, a lot of times this joint would just collapse when I didn't want it to. And that would just make it really difficult to make a stroke. Basically it wouldn't happen on time, or it wouldn't happen at all, or it would just be very out of control. And I realized that, I used to think about strength mainly as just muscle strength or like grip strength. But what I learned is that your other parts of your body, like your joints, your tendons or your ligaments, they can build strength in terms of being firm, in terms of being rigid when you want them to, and in terms of learning to not move or not move as much when you want them to do that. So because of the things that I'd been through, of course, I'd lost a lot of strength in my body, and I did eventually build it back. But the first time I played, I felt like I had no control over these joints, and they were moving all over the place. They were moving when I didn't want them to, and it made it pretty much impossible to play. I mean, I wasn't depressed or anything. I just thought, wow, I had developed a lot of strength in my tip joints, and I didn't even realize it. I mean, when I play, I don't think about moving from the tip joints near as much as I think about probably the big joint and also how the middle one works. And I've gone through trying different things with the tip joints, which is what I'm going to kind of talk about next, because I think this is really interesting. But it really was apparent to me how important that is. And, you know, whatever you kind of think your tip joints do, knowing that you have control over that and you can anticipate what's happening, okay? So people have different amounts of flexibility with their tip joints. And my teacher showed me this one time, and it really was amazing. So you can just stick your finger out straight and then just gently flex up your tip joint so it won't go anymore. And you can see how much bend you have. And it differs from finger to finger. So those first two for me are pretty straight. This one's got a little more. Okay, look at my pinky though. It's got a lot. Okay. And I have students that for the index finger, it's like a U. Like they have extremely flexible tip joints. Some people, they like their finger is just straight. Like even if they're pushing up like this much, it's very straight. They don't have much flexibility in their joints at all. And I've heard people describe how to use your tip joints differently. Some people say you keep them loose all the time. That's kind of what my teacher used to say. All the time, keep them loose, always loose, okay? Some people say you keep them firm, like a scratch. So why do people say different things? I think because they have different amounts of flexibility in their tip joints. And for some people, I'm guessing the people that have firmer joints naturally, they probably can just let them go. For people that have a lot of flexibility in their joints, I mean, if you tell your finger to make the stroke and then it starts to move and then this joint bends way back like that, I can't see how that can possibly be very efficient. So I would say you probably are going to have more firmness in the tip joint. Okay, so that's what I tell people who have super flexible joints. I say, well, you might have to make more of an effort, at least for a while, to keep them from moving as much. Because I think the bottom line is, when you make a stroke, you want it to feel like one thing. If you move, and then it's like, this moves, and then this moves, then I think that will probably get in your way. That's what was happening to me after I got out of the hospital and hadn't played the guitar in a few weeks. It was like I would go to move, but then the tip joints would move, and it just made me feel like I couldn't play. The right hand wasn't working, the plucking hand, it wasn't working. So my theory is that, you know, either people apply the appropriate amount of firmness to the tip joint, because if you have too much tension, then the sound is going to be too stiff. And that's something a lot of people have to deal with, myself included, when you begin to play, is that maybe you don't need to squeeze as much with the tip joints. You learn to control them and just apply the amount that you need. But either people can just apply the right amount, or they can predict just by feel how the tip joint will move so that it becomes part of their stroke. So that it doesn't feel like 1-2. they just know that when they move, the tip joint will flex a certain amount, and they work that into their stroke, and they can time it just right. And it's kind of a natural part of technique. So I imagine one of those two things is the case. For me, and what I tell people is you just want to be able to control them. If control feels like you can let them go and they take care of themselves, then great. If control feels like you just put the right amount of tension so that you can feel, you can have the feel to make the note sound the way you want, then great. Just kind of whatever works. But I learned through this experience how important the tip joints are. And when I had lost control of them, well, I just basically couldn't play. And I'm a big fan of, I guess what I would call productive thinking. It's the opposite of negative thinking. I don't think it's exactly the same as positive thinking, because I'm not a super positive person. I can be, but it's not, to me, it's not the exact same thing as being productive. In other words, just, looking forward more than you look back, progressing more than you regress. Because things happen to us in our life. I mean, it's uncontrollable, and things that we don't want to happen to us. So I didn't want my appendix to explode. I didn't want to miss 2 to 2.5 weeks of playing the guitar, but it happened, and I learned something really important through that experience. I learned that the tip joint control is vital to the way that I play the guitar, and also that I had built a lot of strength in the tip joints over the years. It's one of the areas that had become stronger and very reliable and controllable. So that's the way that I interpreted that. Not to say, oh, well, I missed this time and then I couldn't play. I couldn't play when I came back. Well, it was a little rough for a few days, but really after that, I really felt pretty fine. I mean, it came back pretty fast. And I learned how important that is, the control over the tip joints. And just the right amount, not too stiff, not too loose. And that's something that is to be developed and kind of focused on. So it's kind of a detail, It's not like I would immediately say first thing, well, get your tip joints under control. The time was just going to have to be right. But I thought it was interesting enough to make a video about, and to just kind of explain it through the lens of the experience that happened to me, in terms of not even realizing how important that was. And it's just, when you've built some technique and your music and you can just play it with a certain amount of, security and reliability, then to have that taken away from you, it's like having the rug pulled out from under you, and you want to do stuff, but you keep tripping up, and you know what it feels like, but you can't get there anymore. And that's what the lack of the control of the tip joint, that's the effect that it had on me. I wanted to do something. I kind of knew what I should be doing and how it would feel, but I just couldn't feel the security until the development and the strength and the reliability came back in the tip joints. So if you're ready to think about it, see what your flexibility is, and then see what you like to do, and see, well, I just kind of let it go and keep them loose, and it feels nice. Or no, I've got to keep them a little firm to get the feel that I want. Or you might even find, I'm actually tensing them really hard, and it's making my sound too stiff. So maybe I can loosen them a little bit, and and maybe get a nicer sound, things like that. So anyway, just stuff that I think is really interesting. So thanks for listening. I hope this will help you come to grips with your own tip joints, because they're super important after all. All right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day, and take care.